hold for some important jobs numbers coming later this week, including the February employment report that comes Friday morning. Virginia Senator Mark Warner says he'll introduce a broad bipartisan bill that will outline an approach to banning or prohibiting foreign technology like the Chinese-owned app TikTok, which sits on the phones of more than 100 million Americans, mostly young people. Some call it a surveillance tool. Jessica Ettinger, CNBC.
We expect our information in real time. US Med carries continuous glucose monitors, which provide real-time readings of blood glucose levels. US Med is an approved provider for Medicare and over 500 private insurers. So call 800-730-8405 today for a free insurance and Medicare benefits check. As easy as, that's 800-730-8405.
Retired or retiring soon? How much money do you need to live comfortably? Retirement Planners of America is here for you. Would you like to have financial peace of mind? Here's how. Step 1. Find out the amount of money you'll need to retire. Step 2. Have a plan to get there. Step 3. Make sure that plan can take advantage of market gains but protect you from market losses. Discover how to do all three with a free consultation at 800-508-6108. That's 800-508-6108.
All investments involve risk, including losses. Past performance does not guarantee future results.
Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. A story over at The Guardian caught my attention today. Evidently some audio out there of a rail worker saying, hey, we got some bad bearings here. Might want to tag this rail car for some repair. Maybe get it looked at, maybe. Only to have the manager say, no, we don't delay. That's going to delay the cargo. Send it right on down. And this is not surprising. This happens in talking with railroaders and talking with workers in general. This kind of stuff happens all the time. It reminds me of, you remember a guy named Don Blankenship? Remember the king of coal from West Virginia? Remember after the Massey mine disaster, it started coming out, some of the stuff that they were doing? You know, there was that memo that your core job is to run coal. You know, we don't need to do any of those safety regulations that are literally crazy. You know, that stuff. Your job is to run more coal. That's not just the coal industry. And I remember back then saying, it's just not there. It's everywhere where workers are powerless to stop it. Powerless to have a voice, powerless to have the control to say no. And I've said before, look, I have been in those situations where you've had things that have been unsafe. As a truck driver for all the years that I've done this, I've had units that you go, not safe, not taking it. But fortunately, I've always had the backing to say, if I'm not taking it, I'm not taking it. That's where today's conversation I had a very long and a really good conversation with a railroader from out west. Again, he's real skittish about getting his name out, and I don't blame him. When you're talking about these big behemoth, these monopolistic companies and the power that they have to make your life miserable, my goal is not to get anybody in trouble and have their life situation change. So I was grateful for him calling me and sharing, what a day in the life is. What the 18 to 20 years that he spent on the railroad, what that's been like over this period of time. And it's been as we've been talking about. Years ago, you had people who did specific crafts. That was their job. And they did their job, and you were called to do your job, and you those didn't mix. This was pre-precision scheduling railroading. PSR, we'll just call that, because this was before that. This is when they had, a third more employees before they started really clamping down on, we got to squeeze the quarter till the eagle screams. And he basically reiterated everything that we've been talking about. The amount of workers slashed, the job classifications taken away, basically people doing things that they're not qualified for, supervisors saying, don't worry about it, we'll push it off to to the PM, the preventative maintenance, a year from now. All the things that we've been hearing about. But to hear him go into the stories of the day to day, and this isn't just an occasional situation. It's a day-to-day fight. It's a constant fight to get these supervisors, these management people who are basically bean counters, who've got quotas to meet, and your health and safety, the public's health and safety, well, that be damned. They got numbers to meet. They got quotas. And that's all they see because, again, I've talked to people who have been put in these precarious situations and go, oh, I made it through a hairy one. Through my skill and ability, for the grace of God, however you're going to frame that, made it through. And again, this is another one of those scenarios where it's the worker who ends up getting the short end of the stick. And I said to him, I go, look, I've been a union member for over 30 years. My union backs me up. I have a contract. He goes, well, let me stop you there. We don't have a contract. We have an agreement. And this, should have known this. Contracts, you can sue people. You can take into court. They're in stone. That's in black and white. As it was mentioned, agreements are made to be broken. And then you go from there. And what's happened, as this guy explained to me, these agreements, and they break these agreements, knowing that there's no penalty at the end. Willy-nilly, because we've allowed that to happen, because there's no teeth in these agreements from what this guy's explaining to me. And that's kind of angering. So when you hear the story of, look, my phone rings 10, 12 times, and they're trying to send me, before I'm off rest, send me to places I'm not qualified to go, and really got into the nitty-gritty of what an engineer, what a conductor does. And how dangerous, it didn't dawn on me that, there are serious downgrades that you have to be able to make riding a train. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're bomb town. And went into some of the nitty-gritty of how they get around regulations, how they load cars so that you don't have to report them for hazmat. Really, again, gaming the system so that they can profit off of when something bad happens. Well, it's somebody else's problem. And the more I thought about it, and the more I talked to this guy, it reminded me of conservatives used to love to beat up on the UAW and on the steel workers. Because if you go back into the 1970s, and I would guess even the railroad workers as well, because if I remember right, the railroads used to have, guys just hanging out on the back of the caboose. Who knows what they were doing? They were just there. There were 2, 3, 4 of them sometimes, I remember as a kid. But they used to love to beat up on the UAW and the steel workers for having, guys who were getting paid just to play cards. They would come in and they would sit on the picnic table and they'd play cards. And I'd go, there's a reason that they're there. They're there at the behest of the company. They're there in case. See, when the unions were stronger, they said, look, we're not going to put people's health and safety at risk to be your just-in-time inventory, to be your just-in-time labor. You're going to have someone available. If someone gets sick, if someone has a kid who gets sick and has to go home, you're going to have somebody right there who's going to be able to jump into that assembly line, be able to jump into that steel mill, and keep the things rolling. So what they had is they had extra people. And that was good, for the company because production didn't stop. It was good for the workers because they had jobs. It was good for the union because it gave some flexibility. It was good, but it was bad for the profit, because for those handful of extra people that they hired, that's less profit for the wealthy, and we can't have that today. And it got me thinking about that, because you don't see that anymore. You don't see reserved labor like you did in the past, where people were paid to just come and just in case. And they would give them some busy work. Go sweep in the parking lot. Go do something. They were utility people. We don't have that anymore. Now it's, especially on the railroad, it's we're going to put you on call. And we're going to call you at any time, day or night. And we're going to call you off of your expertise to do other things. And yeah, you'll probably file a grievance, and you'll maybe get a little extra pay or something for running somebody around. But that's how they run it. And you don't have the best qualified people doing things. And you get inspections pencil whipped through. And you have management who said, don't worry about it, even when they do find something. That's a recipe for disaster on every front. And, when I finished up with this guy, this is one of those things where, he said, look, I've been working all these years, 30 plus years. And if I lost this job, I'm not long till I'm homeless. And everyone on the railroad knows that, and the railroads know that. They know that this is a good job. They know it pays well. They know it's got good benefits. And they're willing to, basically hold people hostage. He said, look, I got 2 kids. I want them to have a better life. I want them to do better. Sadly, in every place you look, things are getting worse. Now, the hope is, out of this tragedy, like the Massey mine disaster, there was some additional regulations. We're going to see something happen here. J.D. Vance, the Republican, Sherrod Brown, the Democrat from Ohio, both of them, they've come forth with this Railway Safety Act of 2023. I don't think it stands a snowball's chance of passing, but it does do some common sense things. It does do something about the weight of these trains and how they're distributed and how they're put together. And if they're going to block railroad crossings and things like that. You're going to have increased fines for violations, for safety violations, from I think it was $225 the maximum fine, $225,000 up to 1% of their operating cost. It's a big deal. The devices that are supposed to be on the side of the road that are now voluntary, there's going to be mandatory with reporting requirements. Also, an update on regulations that include hazmat. No more of this, if you've got 34 cars on a train, you don't have to report it. And if there 20 of them aren't together, you don't have to report it. Every bit of hazmat now has to be reportable. This is a big step in the right direction. Is it the end-all, be-all? No. I think staffing levels, they're going to put staffing levels at 2 people per train. I'm of the mindset minimum 3, preferably 4. But this is a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 5-mile long train. I'm sorry. 2 guys on a 5-mile long train, I'm sorry, that's insane. And what we have is a Republican Party right now. Can't burdensome regulations. Ask those people in East Palestine. Ask them how the burdensome regulations are working out for them. Or the free regulations. Because again, thanks to Donald Trump and his appointees, this is what we got. And I know, but Biden's been Biden. You don't just flip a switch and replace all the horrible. You don't just flip a switch and replace all the regulations that were undone. There's a whole process, a long process. It's like my grandfather always said, any idiot with a hammer can tear down a house. You need a craftsman to build one. Same thing with regulation. Any idiot can tear them down. Now you got to go through the long, arduous process of getting them through. And I got to tell you, I don't think it's going to happen. Even with all the outrage and all of the news and all of the people going, no, we need some. I don't think it's going to happen. But I'm hopeful. That's why you need to be calling your senators. You need to be calling your representatives and saying, look, we need it. We need life-saving regulations. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I go back to the word I used the other day, sophistry. Again, I think an important word for the day in which we are in, given the fact that you've got the F channel and you've got, well, a Republican-led House. Remember, the definition for the word sophistry, the use of fallacious arguments, especially when the intention is to deceive, a suitable or tricky, superficially plausible, but generally fallacious method of reasoning, a false argument. A false argument. A lie. A lie. Yeah. I look at Jim Jordan right now. Jim Jordan, my new example of just this. Remember all of this? The whistleblowers were coming, had a bunch of them. They were going to expose all the fraud. They were going to get the FBI. They were going to get all of them. They had whistleblowers from everywhere. There were whistleblowers everywhere. Turns out none of the 3 paid actors that they brought in were actually whistleblowers. And they were just that. They were paid actors. They were people who came from, basically the Trumposphere. They had ties to this Kash Patel and Mark Meadows, and they're not whistleblowers because they didn't actually see anything. They know nothing firsthand. This again is, I think, widening the definition of what a whistleblower is. I heard, I think, maybe I saw, I read online. That's really not helpful. I made up while reading, Facebook on the can. Not really helpful in a congressional testimony. But yet Jim Jordan brought this out. And what's interesting is even other Republicans are kind of going, Jim, it's kind of embarrassing. You promised to bring the goods on this. Because remember, this was the weaponization committee. We were going to see how the Democrats weaponized the FBI. Because we're going to bring all these FBI agents out who are going to blow the whistle and blow the top off of things. They were going to open the curtains and show us behind. And what they showed is, again, there really is no depth that Republicans won't stoop to make their political point, to win their argument. I mean, Marjorie Greene the other day, bringing out a poor woman who lost children, accusing Biden of murdering her children when they died during the Trump administration. It's a horrible tragedy. But to turn that and to take that and go, see, we've got this poor woman is suffering because of Joe Biden, and you go, no, that's not true. But this is another one of these moments where you now have these crazy conspiracy theorists posing as whistleblowers. And you have a congressman, a sitting congressman. Isn't there a law about getting people to perjure themselves? Is there something in there? It's just remarkable. But here's the thing, and this is where we have to have better conversations and talk to each other. And I've been saying for a long time that I've lost a lot of conservative friends, and it's because there's some arguments, and I finally came up to why. I was watching Jon Stewart. He had this state senator from Oklahoma, this Nathan Dame, on, and he was interviewing him about loosening gun regulations and banning kids from seeing drag shows, and he did an incredible. It's a master's class in using an argument against someone, because what he was able to do is get this state senator to say what he wanted to say and what he actually believes. And as I've said, this is probably why I've lost a lot of my conservative friends over the years who don't want to talk to me anymore, because I question what they believe. This guy came into this interview totally outgunned, but believing he was right, believing he was on the moral ground. We're going to stop kids from seeing drag shows. And what it turned into, and Stewart made the right argument, the one that I've been saying for a long time, is, and where Democrats should be living, is in constitutional principles of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Your constitutional rights of free expression, of free speech, of all of these things that conservatives love to say that they love. In fact, they carry that Constitution with them, so they say, but don't actually know what it means, or only think it applies to them. And this is where all of this gets a little murky and a little difficult. And we're having actual conversation and actual, a discourse, and then going through a legislative process of compromise and debate, really important. Maybe not having sideshows, maybe not, getting people to come in and pretend to be whistleblowers who are actually just conspiracy theorists. Maybe being honest in what you're presenting. Maybe that's a start, especially if you're a sitting congressman. But I highly suggest people take a look at the Stewart clip, because it really was a master's class in turning an argument and making the right one. Because he turned the whole, well, we're protecting children. Yeah, but you're not going to do anything about, permitting guns or, it was really incredible. And this is where we have to have these conversations around what is reality. Understand, the religious right are the people who believe that they're right. They're moving full head crazy. I look at Iowa. Iowa used to be a good, strong, moderate state. Used to be the common sense, the Midwestern state with common sense. Now it's losing its freak. It's the Florida of the Midwest. Because you now have a number of state house Republicans in Iowa who have now introduced a joint resolution to amend their state constitution to ban same-sex marriage. We're going back and fighting that again. And it all comes around to this, because again, it's about the outrage. It's about the anger. It's about keeping people pitted against each other and afraid of each other. For instance, there's some guy who does a TV show on one of the right-wing crazy channels on like, I think, DirecTV. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he posted a picture of Pete Buttigieg and his husband and the babies. I guess they've adopted babies. And to this guy, this is just the most horrible thing in the world. And I look at that and I go, those kids are probably going to have great opportunities growing up. Good for them. I wish the best for all of them. I don't know how you put yourself in a position to have the kind of hate and the kind of judgmental anger that we see coming out of the people who claim to be right. And what's frustrating to me is our political system, the right is using to punish people who are trying to express themselves, who are trying to live their life, pursue life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, while telling us that they believe in the Constitution. This is the bizarre part in all this. That these are the folks who are telling us that they're firm constitutionalists. In fact, they've got it in their Twitter bios. while they then go about trying to figure out how to stop everyone from leading their best life. Which again, very, very weird to me. But I guess not surprising. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. More interest and fun on the Fox front. Fox getting sued by Dominion voting systems. Also, some more probably coming. My next guest, one of them. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. National headlines spread fear of the growing wildcat strikes at Chrysler and Briggs auto plants in Detroit. The Wildcats had increased to 35,000 strikers and idled workers at 2 Chrysler plants and 7 Briggs plants. The strike wave started a week earlier at the Dodge main plant in Detroit. 8 of the union's best leaders had been discharged for refusing to go along with a production line speed-up. Briggs management followed Chrysler's union-busting campaign by firing 7 UAW officers at the Mack Avenue plant. 3 days later, Briggs fired another 8 committeemen and stewards, which then provoked the walkout. Company officials and the War Labor Board were outraged at the halt in war production of tanks, B-29 Super Fortresses, anti-aircraft guns, rockets, and trucks. The Michigan legislature introduced a bill to define as a felony any strike participation that violated a labor relations contract. The War Labor Board demanded that both sides meet in Washington to end the walkout. Strike leaders defied the wartime no-strike pledge and ignored the international's threat of disciplinary action. Strikers had the full backing of local UAW presidents. The UAW conceded that management had provoked the wildcatting through indiscriminate firings. Workers argued that if the War Labor Board prioritized production over union busting, they would order the reinstatement of all the discharged leaders. The Flint Labor Council passed a resolution demanding that all CIO and other union representatives resign immediately from the War Labor Board. It considered the board as stacked against labor. Workers at Chrysler and Briggs would soon end their walkout with guarantees of arbitration for reinstatement of the fired militants.
Stuff happens, right? I mean, who could have thought that in these modern times of digital monitoring of everything, something as massive as a freight train could become a toxic fireball rolling undetected and unslowed into an Ohio town? But a Norfolk Southern train did just that, derailing in East Palestine and contaminating the air, water, land, and families with tons of cancer-causing chemicals. Gosh, exclaimed Norfolk Southern. Gosh, exclaimed the Ohio governor. Gosh, exclaimed the U.S. Transportation Chief. Gosh, exclaimed the GOP chair of the Rail Transportation Committee. This is a terrible, unexpected accident, and we're all appalled by it. Only, all of these officials knew full well that this disaster would happen, though they didn't know exactly where. Indeed, far from unexpected, there are more than 1,000 preventable train derailments in the U.S. every year. Norfolk Southern had another one only days after the one in Ohio. And these things don't just happen. They're caused by the profiteering greed of the monopolistic industry's top executives and rich investors. While Norfolk's boardroom elites have been pocketing record profits in recent years, they've used armies of lobbyists and multi-million-dollar political donations to kill safety protections that would prevent such a disastrous record. To cut costs and jack up profits, railroad bosses have rigged the rules to run trains that are absurdly long, go too fast, carry undisclosed toxics in weak tanker cars, have no fire detectors, use outmoded braking systems, and have as few as 1 crew member on board. 1. This is Jim Hightower saying Norfolk's derailed train was made to derail. It pulled 149 cars stretching nearly 2 miles down the track, and it was ill-equipped to detect fires and other problems. This disaster was not an accident. It was mandated by the corporate and government officials now professing outrage.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're finding out an awful lot because of this Dominion lawsuit against Fox. And I've been saying for a while, it would be great to see, well, a line of people doing what Dominion has done. And that whole discovery thing, that's the fun part. Getting those back channel conversations and what we found out during this Dominion suit so far, what's been leaked, what's been put out so far is all of the people who are the talking heads are basically mocking the audience for being stupid. Because they know what it is. It's not about red or blue. It really is, like Rupert Murdoch said, about green. But the thing is, they cause real damage, and real damage to individuals, not just a government that they despise, but to people. And one of those folks is my next guest. Who's been on the show a couple of times before. Her name's Nina Jankowicz. She's the author of How to Lose the Information War and How to Be a Woman Online. You may remember her as the former executive director of the really short-lived Disinformation Governance Board that Fox celebrated taking down. Nina, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rick.
So let's get right to the beginning of this. I understand you are about to, or have already, filed a lawsuit against this. Why?
So I haven't filed the lawsuit yet. I'm actually seeking to crowdfund part of the legal fees for my suit against Fox, as well as some of the suits that I've had to take on and lawyers I've had to hire as a result of Fox lies. But essentially, Rick, I took a job to serve my country in my area of expertise as the executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board at DHS, which was just an intradepartmental working group to bring to bear best practices in countering disinformation in this sprawling government agency. The right wing, and some folks on the very far left wing, I have to say, completely blew it out of proportion. As a result of their lies about what the board was supposed to do, they called it a ministry of truth, called me President Biden's chief censor. Again, the board had no ability or authority to censor, to arbitrate speech whatsoever. My life has been irrevocably changed. I have security concerns. I had to take out a restraining order against one of my stalkers. This was all while I was in the very late stages of my first pregnancy and then the newborn period and infancy period with my son. I get recognized on the street now by people who wish me harm. I get, torrents of abuse. And I'm not just talking about mean tweets. I'm talking about threats. Somebody today, after, some conservative influencers started talking about my crowdfunding campaign, said that everything would be better if I had a bullet in my head. Like, that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. It's not just mean words online, right? And this is all because Fox lied about me literally hundreds of times. They completely manufactured things that they said that I said. They took my past statements completely out of context. They took manipulated videos that internet trolls had created of me and presented them as if they were facts. And it's not that I'm trying to silence anyone doing amazing journalism. That is not the case. I'm happy for Fox or anybody else to do real reporting on me, the board, whatever. But the fact is, they lied about me hundreds of times, and it took me a little while, given everything that was happening in my life, to kind of comb through these statements and look at what was being said. But when I see it, there's clearly, the threshold being met of actual malice or reckless disregard, which is what you have to meet as a public figure to launch one of these cases. And I just, I worry about what happens with our democracy, right? When people are being threatened in this way as a result of news coverage, and we kind of just shrug and say that that's normal. That's not okay, and it keeps people out of public service, and it changes how our democracy operates. And the law exists exactly for this purpose. So that's why I decided to come to this conclusion and bring the lawsuit.
And the other part of it is it was coordinated. I mean, I think that's an important part of this, because it was all of the Fox talking heads calling you the disinformation czar, claiming that you're editing people's speech, called you a conspiracy theorist, a useful idiot, far-left lunatic, unhinged, scary. One guy even said that when they closed down the Disinformation Governance Board, that they love political scalps.
Yeah.
I mean, so they attacked you and attacked you often, and then celebrated in public out loud that we got her scalp. See? That's scary stuff. They're supposed to be news. What happened to fair and balanced?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to understand people who look at what happened to me and celebrate it. And that's exactly what Fox did. The video that I have on my crowdfunding page ends with Jesse Waters asking one of his guests, do you feel sorry for what he calls me, the disinformation czarist? And his guest kind of smirks and says, I confess I don't. And what really strikes me is that this guy, his guest, has a picture of a young woman. I don't know if it's his wife or his daughter in the background of his shot. He's zooming in from his home, as most people have been doing over the past couple of years. And I wonder how he'd feel if that woman were the target of the sort of threats that I've gotten. I doubt that he'd be very happy about that, and I think he'd be seeking justice for whomever that woman is in his life. And I think we all have to think that way, right? This isn't something normal. This isn't something that anybody should wish on anybody else. I wouldn't wish this on any of the Fox celebrities. You know, one woman had said something like, she's mad about a couple of mean tweets. She can dish it, but she can't take it. First of all, I don't know what she means. Dish it. I'm not dishing anything out. I don't abuse people online. In fact, I'm an advocate for people to treat each other civilly online. And then another one of the hosts said, you know, she couldn't be a Fox News host. And I'm upset that they get that stuff too. Like our country is sick and the way that we're operating is sick, but I think they need to recognize their role in that. And Fox News is absolutely one of the biggest purveyors of vitriol. I can absolutely track every time I'm on Fox News because I get a wave of harassment coming into my inbox. And it's not just, again, mean tweets. It is threats. It is direct messages to you know, my inbox, my Facebook messages. People have called my mother. They've sought information about the rest of my family. The guy I got a restraining order against was curious about whether my son actually existed because I hadn't posted a picture of him online. I wonder why I hadn't posted a picture of him online, right? Yeah. It's because I don't want people to be using him as a target. And that's the reality of life right now. And it's not just me that it's happened to. If you look at election workers across the country since 2020, if you look at, you know, school board members, this is becoming the norm. And I think it is absolutely disgusting.
Can you imagine, and you know, you're talking about your child, can you imagine some of these idiots putting the crosshairs on your child? I mean, this is what these people do. I mean, just a story from Michigan that you had, you know, some lunatic going after Dana Nessel. I mean, you have these stories of the kind of vitriol that you're talking about coming from these right-wing outlets. So when you look at the F channel, you know, you are, you know, an expert in cyber warfare. You're an expert in disinformation, someone I look to for guidance on a lot of this stuff. Isn't Fox News, isn't that you know, disinformation at its height? I mean, you know, shouldn't we be doing something about that? Look, I'm not against, I'm in no way, shape, or form against the press, but they're not the press. These seem like hit people.
Well, you know, there was even a lawsuit recently in which somebody was trying to sue Tucker Carlson for defamation, and they lost the suit because the conclusion was that Tucker Carlson was an entertainer, not a journalist. But of course, you know, people treat Tucker and many of the other Fox News hosts as if they are journalists and the words that they speak are the gospel truth, when in reality, what we know from the Dominion suit is that they are not the gospel truth, and that many of the Fox News hosts are lying deliberately to their audience for profit. And the definition of disinformation is false or misleading information spread with malign intent. And I think profit can certainly be a malign intent. And I hope these lawsuits continue to shine a light on what it is that Fox is doing. The problem, of course, is that I think even when confronted with the facts, many people don't want to hear the truth. So the video that I put together, you know, with the help of a friend, I think shows exactly what they did and shows the lies that they've told about me. And what was interesting to me as the campaign started to pick up steam over the past couple of hours, the abuse that I've been getting on Twitter is, I would say, a majority of the abusive messages that I've gotten in the past, you know, 12 hours or so have been based on the lies that Fox told about me. So it's like, even when they're confronted with the truth, these lies that have been seeded by the network are still the thing that kind of the thing that is really the governing rule in their heads. And it's really sad to me. And one of the things, you know, you said, can I imagine them putting the crosshairs on my kid? Yeah, I can. It's really scary to me, especially having been recognized now out in public a couple of times. Luckily, my kid wasn't with me. But I don't want him to have to deal with any of this. And I think it's kind of sick that people's responses, well, you should just go, and there were a couple people who said this today, you should just fade away from the public. Like, just go spend time with your son then. I'm sorry, I have a right to use my voice, my First Amendment rights, right? I have a right to speak out and do the work that I've done for almost a decade now. I have a right to contribute to the discourse in my country, and I'm not going to let these people take it away from me just because they've been lied to and because they think they can scare me. It is absolutely scary, but I'm not gonna cede that ground to them. And when people are messaging me, it's often, on Facebook in particular, older folks who often have, their grandkids or their dogs in their Facebook profile pictures. So sometimes when I'm feeling, kind of magnanimous, I'll message them and say, hey, like, cute dog, cute grandkid. I just had, my first kid. Just wanted to let you know that there is a person behind the profile. I think a lot of people forget that. And certainly Fox has demonized me and so many others to such a degree that people do forget that. I'm a character to them, but I want to remind everybody that I'm a human being.
No, and good on you for taking this on, because I think it's really important. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Nina Jankowicz. She's the author of How to Lose the Information War and How to Be a Woman Online. She's also seeking there's a GoFundMe account out there to raise funds to take on Fox, something that I am going to donate to. I hope others will, because most certainly this is something that we have to. We've got to bring news back to our news. You brought up a moment ago that Tucker said that he's an entertainer, he's not news. Does this not then, isn't this the grounds to say, well, you're not protected by the First Amendment? You're now open to, defamation and other things in ways that the press, protected under the First Amendment, may not be. I'm curious your thoughts.
Oh, well, so I'm not a legal scholar, and I'm going to leave it to lawyers to kind of argue the case for me, but I wouldn't be suing Tucker directly. It would be a case against Fox because there was clearly, as you said before, coordination amongst their hosts, their talking heads, their producers, even the guests that they brought in. And those talking points were circulated across the entire network. So I think the fault in that case, as I understand it, was that it was directly against Tucker rather than the network. And the network clearly doesn't always have control over its hosts, as we've seen with the Dominion lawsuit. And when it comes to entertainment, I think a lot of people can say, oh, it's just parody. We see that protected on Twitter. Even Elon Musk's Twitter, we see parody protected to a certain degree. And so people can get away when they say it's just a joke. But the fact stands that in our extremely polarized environment in which people are radicalized to violence by the media and by the online environment that they exist in, or kind of that merges for them, I think there's a responsibility that entertainers, that media need to take and understand that their words have consequences. And I have to say too, of course you can't sue members of Congress for the things that they say in the course of their duties, but members of Congress played a large role in this as well, in laundering these theories, conspiracy theories and lies about me. And I think we really need to hold our elected officials accountable as well. We need our elected officials to be the beacons of truth and paragons of truth that we hope ourselves to be. I think my dog has just joined our podcast here.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we've been talking about the word sophistry for the last couple of days. You look at the thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene did with that poor woman who lost her children, saying that Joe Biden did this, when the reality is it happened before Biden was president. You see Jim Jordan putting on this display of, oh, we've got all these FBI agents, these whistleblowers, and you find out they're all paid shills. It's political theater. So the question that I have you, as a cyber expert, as a disinformation expert, how's the average citizen wade through what is clearly BS? And we're just inundated with this horrible, unconscionable nonsense put forth by people who don't care about democracy. They don't care about right or wrong. They care about pure power. And as I think Rupert Murdoch has the phrase of the ages. It's not about red or blue. It's about green.
Yeah.
How
shocking was that?
How do we wade through that?
I mean, so this is where, we have to hope that the rest of the press that is still doing good work continues to survive. So I'm going to give kind of a groan-worthy answer here, but we need to continue to invest in our media, whether that means, making having a subscription to the media outlets that you listen to, that you read, or watch, donating to your local PBS or NPR station. All of that's so important because there is still real journalism in this country. I cut my teeth in the post-Soviet world, especially in Russia, and the reason that what we see in Russia happening right now, where Russians are questioning the reality of the war in Ukraine, despite the pictures that they're being shown. They say, these are made up or they're fabricated, whatever. They're from other wars. That is because of the grip that Putin has on the media system in Russia and the fact that dissent is not tolerated. And we still have dissent, we still have criticism, and we need to preserve that. And the media is a really, really big part of that. So that's why I think it's all very ironic, right? That people think I was a giant censor. I'm one of the biggest advocates for free expression and free media that you'll ever find on the face of the planet. And I'll defend the people who are really in harm's way in places like Russia, like Belarus. And yet, I've been made out to be this fascist. It's just hilarious. Anyway, that's what we need to do. People need to support your show and other shows like it where we're committed to telling the truth.
But we live in a world where nothing can be true if everything's false, or however you want to phrase that. And I look at what they want to do down in Florida. They want anyone who is going to write about DeSantis or any of the legislature, any bloggers are going to have to register with the state.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds Soviet-esque.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I saw that last night, I tweeted right away, because these are the types of legislation that I've written about before, long before I joined DHS, where, people who were seeking to quote unquote counter disinformation in less than democratic societies would have this sort of registration for the press. And it's really just a way to keep a leash on journalists, even if you're calling it bloggers. I mean, think about some of the more powerful, Substack newsletters that we see these days that have hundreds of thousands or even millions of subscribers. Those would be considered blogs, and they'd have to register, and they'd have kind of this check on them. And that's not the way that freedom of the press is supposed to work in the United States of America. And I had people in my replies saying, oh, this is just so that we can see where the funding comes from. Frankly, that's not the way that the press works in the United States of America either. Where does the funding come from for a lot of the cable news networks? Yes, we see, commercials, but they've got funding coming from big donors, from, vested interests as well, and they're not required to disclose those to anybody. So I think this law hopefully won't get passed. I hope there will be enough outrage that it won't get passed, and it's a great time for anybody in Florida to write to their representatives and tell them that they oppose it.
Yeah, but if they can spin it in a way that we're going after the woke and going to make the libtards cry, who knows? Last question I've got for you: how can we help? What can folks do? Where do we go? Because I know everybody I know thrilled that you're doing this. How can we help?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the support. So if you can donate, every penny counts. I would love your support in that way, but also sharing the fundraiser really matters as well, getting it to people out there, like-minded folks who think that this is an important cause. So the link is kind of long, but you can go to my Twitter, which is Wikipedia, WICZIPEDIA, Wikipedia, or just search Nina Jankowicz on Twitter. You will find it. I bet if you search Nina Jankowicz GoFundMe, you'll see the link as well. But any support you can give in terms of sharing it to your friends, family who would be interested in it, I would really, really support that. Thank you so much.
Nina, I appreciate the time. I hope you'll come back and share some more as this goes on. Most certainly want to help, so I want to make sure that you come back early and often.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick. Have a good night.
Thanks so much, Nina Jankowicz. Again, this is another one of those things. If you can chip in, by all means, got to reclaim our news. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that William Greene, longtime president of the American Federation of Labor, was born in Coshocton, Ohio. Greene's family were English and Welsh immigrant miners. He entered the mines at the age of 16. Before he was 20, he had become secretary of the Coshocton Progressive Miners Union. That local would eventually join the United Mine Workers of America. By 1906, Green had risen to lead the Ohio chapter of the UMWA. Less than 2 decades later, when longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died, Green was named his successor. Green believed in union management cooperation. He thought labor could win more gains at the table with management than they could standing in opposition. Green helped secure some major legislative victories for labor, including the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, which strengthened collective bargaining rights. He also supported the Fair Labor Standards Act, which established the 40-hour workweek and the minimum wage. His tenure at the helm of the AFL was during some of the most tumultuous years in U.S. labor history. This was an era of massive sit-down strikes and organizing drives for workers in industries like steel, meatpacking, and the auto industry. Green supported organizing industrial workers, but the AFL's leadership at the time, by and large, favored skilled trade labor. Increasingly, Green clashed with UMWA President John L. Lewis over the question of industrial unions. This led to a split in the labor movement and the formation of the separate Congress of Industrial Organizations. Green continued to lead the AFL until his death in 1952. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Yeah, I can't imagine what she has gone through, because if you watch some of the clips that have come out around, and I remember when they put her forth as the executive director of this disinformation governance board, and the idea was just to point out, what kind of, if you pay attention to social media, you can see it. You can see the wave of trolls and the troll farms doing what they do. Because, sometimes I'll throw something out and you'll see, Jimmy 15 letters and numbers after his name with no followers, commenting the same thing that the same 15 other ones that look just like them do. Because it's what they do. It's these attacks, because it's to get people who are just watching and reading this stuff to think, oh, hey, there's someone who thinks like I do, or moreover, shaping people's thoughts. So am I surprised that this woman's getting threats? Am I surprised, especially this woman? Because I get threats too, but not as many as I would, I believe, if I were a woman. Because it's a lot harder to intimidate me than it is a woman with a child. But over at the F channel, they don't seem to care. And to have that smirky little snot, say, well, we got their scalp. We love scalps. That is not media. And again, it's information. Then stop with the fair and balanced news. If we're to move forward as a country, and look, we're heading towards dangerous times. Understand, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, they are all running disinformation campaigns. And we're easily divided because we're such a diverse country. We're such a large country. We're such a diverse country with different ethnicities and different belief structures. And look, some that maybe I don't agree with, some that you don't agree with. But we have this wonderful thing called the Constitution that guarantees our rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I remember in 8th grade learning about this. I remember when Mr. Petrus stood up in front of the room and explained this concept. I still remember it to this day. That each of us have this right to pursue our best life, our path. And as long as our rights don't infringe on someone else's, we can do what we want. The government won't stop us. And yet I come to this moment in time and I see wow. the kind of vitriol and look, I've talked to a number of people, especially during the Trump years, who went through the doxing and went through all of the assaults on social media. And look, I don't spend a lot of time reading the comments on social media. I don't, because if it's someone I know, if someone that follows me, I know who they are, then yeah, I'll interact. But for the trolls, I don't deal with the trolls because they're just trying to get a rise. They're just trying to influence others and then try and bait you into an argument so that they can use it to try and convince others that they're right. When the reality